This is Project Management Paradise.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Project Management Paradise podcast, your passport to project success. I'm your host, Aaron Murphy, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Minney. Richard brings over 20 years of experience in the aerospace and defense and business software industry. His company, 25, provides specialized SAP software solutions focused on program management, costing, and pricing for large manufacturers and government contractors. Richard, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm very well, thank you.
That's good. That's good. Richard, for anyone who might not know you, maybe you could tell us about yourself and your background and how you became an expert in business software and ultimately founding your own company, 25.
Yes, I was an engineer in the UK, worked at Rolls-Royce Air Engines and Ford Motor Company, and then took redundancy and looked for a job in a consulting firm with a little known software package called SAP that no one had ever heard of back in the early 80s. I was one of the first people working on SAP in the UK, and I also came out to the States in 99 when it was picking up in the States. So I've been doing SAP for quite a long time. Throughout that time, I focused on the gaps more than on the functionality. I was always interested in aerospace and defense. I basically positioned SAP software for aerospace and defense. I worked in Germany for a couple of years at their headquarters, building their software out for aerospace and defense. And it still, even today, doesn't meet all the needs of aerospace and defense companies. So I've always been passionate about solving problems, meeting customer requirements, and coming up with good software. I started in a couple of software firms. One was a PSA tool, and 25 is now meeting a need around project-based pricing and costing. So essentially, it's CPQ for projects and services for project-based industries. So that's my background.
Amazing. And can you define project pricing and estimation on what the difference is between both?
Yes. So project estimation is essentially the costing side. So when a company in a project-based industry, such as aerospace and defense, construction, and professional services and complex manufacturing, they sell complex products or services that are not repetitive. So we're not talking about widgets or cookies being sold where there's a lot of the same. We're talking about something that's customized and tailored for every client. So that's basically what a project is in essence. And you have to cost it in order to understand what you're going to sell it for, whether you're selling it time and materials cost plus or fixed price, and then you have to price it. And pricing the project is key. 80% of the profit margin of a project is determined by how much you price it for, how accurate the pricing is. So only 20% is determined by how well you deliver it. So it's very important to get that right. So essentially, project pricing and estimating is all about pricing out the project as accurately as possible and finding out what you can charge the customer, what they're willing to pay based on the value, the market position, your competitive position, and of course, the cost of the project.
Amazing. And what are the three most common things to get right when it comes to project pricing and estimating?
So the three most important things. The first is understanding what you're going to base your estimate on. We all like to sell stuff that we've done before, but because we're selling projects, it's not identical to what we've done before. So it's very important to find some similar work that you've done prior. Could be multiple projects that make up the new project. Could be templates, could be a library, could be real performance history. But you've got to try and ascertain the closest match to something you've done prior. Doing that will give you the 80% of your solution out of the box right away. And then you can focus on the final 20% instead of essentially making it up from scratch. Too many companies rely on tribal knowledge. They go to Fred, who's done it 5 years ago, and they talk to Fred, and Fred's got it on his laptop somewhere, and then comes up with something, and they don't have a database with all of the prior history and a smart way to search through that history, perhaps using AI to search through that history to work out what's similar. That's one thing. The second thing is for the 20% you do have to estimate, doing it accurately. So a lot of people do essentially guesstimates. They say, oh, I need a project manager and a solution architect and a couple of consultants and this and that, 12 engineers and 6 software engineers, and it's probably 12 months. And then they get their numbers. And that's very tempting because it's very easy. Everyone can understand it. You can put it in a spreadsheet. But in reality, there's a lot more to it than that. It could be that it's parameter based. You could be doing a sizing kind of formula where you say, how many web pages am I building? How many lines of code am I writing? How many control towers am I installing? How many transmission lines am I building? Whatever it is, you can define your estimate using parameters. And you can also come up with very sensible ways, such as looking at latest cost rates and rescheduling and looking at who's doing the work and efficiency factors and learning curves to understand how you can estimate more accurately. And when it comes to material costs, for a complex manufacturer, material costs represent probably 70%. Labor is only 30%. So when it comes to material costs, it's very important to look at prior history, production history and purchase history, vendor quotations, vendor contracts, to really understand what the estimate is. Especially when you're bidding for the US government, you've probably seen the news about various fines. There's been more than $1 billion in fines over the last 3 years to big companies for deficient or false pricing. So it's very important to justify to the government exactly what things cost and why. So that's the second thing. The third thing is the pricing aspect. So having a knowledge of the cost is one piece, but you have to understand the price. And the most important thing to price effectively is to know your customer. You could sell the same piece of work, one to a very small firm that perhaps doesn't have very deep pockets, doesn't want to take a value-based approach, and you could sell the same piece of work to a large firm, and you could sell it as a value as opposed to a cost plus or time and materials. You could double the price in certain cases. There's a lot of variation. You could also be competing against a bunch of other companies, and you know you're ahead of them all. So you can charge more and still win the work. Or if you're behind and you're trying to get strategically enter a market, you're going to have to cut your price, maybe make a loss in order to get this first project in a new market. So understanding your competitors, understanding your customer is the third most important thing, because if you can increase your prices on average by 1%, and you're a $1 billion company, that's 10 million in the bottom line. $10 million will pay for any system many times over.
That's really interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned about the tribal knowledge where others would have this and it's not documented down. In our previous episode with Jessica Wilson, she mentioned having the same issue in the aerospace and defense industry where someone could have been working in an industry in a company, apologies, for over 20 years, but they've never taken down any of this information. And
Yep.
would you say it's important to always document this and to always have access to files? So just in case someone did leave a company, that the employees could just pull from this information rather than being in the dark.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not that it's not documented at all. It's that it's on spreadsheets. The contracts are usually on PDFs that have been emailed. The project plans are usually on spreadsheets, sometimes Microsoft Project. And even if the spreadsheets are on SharePoint, nobody understands them. Nobody gets them. They're all different. Every single one's unique. I've submitted thousands of proposals in the past, and not one of them was the same until I started 25. They all have different formulas, different columns, and so on. So you can't read them. So if you have a web application and everything's in the same place, and all the performance history is in Cora, for example, it's all in the same place. Now you can start to search through it. And you can search with a large company, you're searching through thousands of projects and looking. Now, you're still going to talk to Fred. You're going to find the project that fits, and you're going to see that it was Fred. And if Fred's around, you're probably going to talk to him and get his help. But you found the right project. You didn't have to know that it existed, and you didn't have to dig it up from his laptop.
Absolutely. And having that one centralized system that you can just pull the information from, I'd imagine has made everything so much easier.
Exactly. It's very important. Yeah, you can start to do so many things when you've got the data in one central place.
And based on your experience, what are some of the pitfalls when it comes to implementing a solution for project pricing and estimating?
So the first challenge is the executive alignment. I know that's a very common IT trope. Any IT system, executive alignment is the most important thing. It's the same with pricing, but it's probably a little unique in that pricing is often done in a spreadsheet, as I mentioned. So that means that there's some benefits there. You can gradually deploy. You don't have to do a big bang. You don't have to do everything overnight. So that's lower risk. But the downside is everyone can go back to their spreadsheet at any time. So you're constantly battling with the user community to get their acceptance. It's not like an SAP system or even a core where the mandate comes down from on high. You have to use the new tool. That people, you've got to kind of persuade the user. And having that executive alignment, having that on high mandate really helps. For example, if they only will accept reports, proposals, dashboards, and we call them pitch decks, where you're basically putting together the proposal pack for management approval. If they only accept them out of the tool, then all those people that revert back to their spreadsheet will be found wanting and basically will realize they're to a losing game by using it. So that's the first thing. The second issue is data. For the same reason that there's a benefit in having a central tool, it also creates a challenge with data migration. Some data is pretty systemized. So perhaps your resource groups or your job classifications, the different types of engineer that you have, that may be in a system, probably in your ERP system or in some HR system, people and so on. But some of the other information, for example, your rates that you've got with different clients, if you're selling services, or the way the products are configured and put together, that may not be in a very good system at all. It could be on a bunch of emails and PDFs and so on. So it can be challenging to get the data into the system. Even prior proposals can be challenging to get into the system because they're probably in Word and there's tables in the Word document and it's not very easy to get the information out. That's probably the second challenge. I'd say the third challenge is integration. You can implement the tool standalone, so it can be deployed as a separate application. We often do that in the first phase. That brings the implementation time down to about 4 months, which is probably in line with some other software packages. But the real benefit comes when it's integrated with your CRM and your ERP and with Cora, with the project management tool. If you have that integration in place, then you're automatically, first of all, CRM, you're automatically pulling the opportunity data down. The opportunity is the trigger when it reaches a bid stage, quote stage. If you have that interface to ERP, you can pull all your cost performance history, all your purchasing history, all your production history, prior timesheet data, how many hours was spent. So that can all come in. If you have integration with Cora, you can automatically set up the project once you've closed the deal. So instead of creating the project manually in the project management tool, you can transfer the proposal into the project management tool. So that integration is super beneficial, but as with any system, integration is hard. Fortunately, we do have a lot of interfaces out of the box that come preset. Fortunately, we also have that, I have 20 years of SAP experience. A lot of our employees are SAP, ex-SAP employees. So we have a lot of integration with SAP, which is probably the most challenging. But that said, it's still a little work to get the integration working.
Absolutely. And having a connector that, as you said, integrates with both a solution, SAP, and your ERP system, I can imagine trying to find one that is suitable is a challenge in itself.
Yeah, it is, because SAP can be set up in lots of different ways. No two SAP systems are alike. So whilst we built interfaces to ECC and to S4 Private Cloud and to S4 Public Cloud, enterprise projects and project and resource management as well, and we've got interfaces to Cora and to Profinder and to Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics, the SAP interfaces are not the same. We've got ways to tweak the field mapping without writing any code. So certainly we can map the interfaces in different ways for different clients, but no two SAP systems are the same. So that makes it a little more challenging.
Interesting. And from your experience, why do construction projects repeatedly go over budget?
Part of it is the estimation. So the estimate is done usually under a little pressure to meet a budget in the first place. But frankly, you don't know what you don't know. So you basically estimate, I need a bunch of carpenters and I need a bunch of this. It's not just construction projects, it's pretty much any project that varies from one to the next. Software projects, IT transformation projects, they go over budget as well. And it's because you don't know a bunch of stuff. And it's very hard to say, okay, I reckon this is 1,000 hours, $1 million, or $100,000. I'm going to triple that for the following reasons. So I'm going to have three times. It's very hard to do that. I'm not suggesting you should triple every estimate. Of course, that's very inaccurate. But there's risks. You can ascertain the risks. You can go into more detail in planning, looking at prior history. I mean, you find a prior project, it was estimated at 1,000 hours. It came in actuals at 2,500 hours. Okay, that's 2.5 times as much as what was estimated. Why? So immediately when you look at prior performance history, you can start to ascertain what the issue is. And it may be that some mistakes were made, and it's not really 2,500 hours, but it may be that it's not 1,000 either, it's 1,800. So you need to understand that in order to, you need to understand that in order to know what the estimate is. So that's the primary reason. People don't go into enough detail, they don't have the information at the start, and they make broad assumptions, and they ignore risks, is the other thing. So risks are really things that could happen, and some of them do, and they will extend the cost of the project. And a lot of people estimate projects without any risks at all, and that's a big mistake because some of them will occur, and they will increase the cost of the project.
And an example of that, would that be supply chain issues in terms of maybe materials and even the workforce itself?
Yep, absolutely. People availability is a big one. More for professional services, to be fair, on that side of things. People availability, client availability, decision making being slow, and then supply chain on the manufacturing side, as you say. Just the development R&D side. If it's pure manufacturing, it's a bit less risky, but then it's not really a project at that point if you're making the same product that you made before. But certainly if you've got R&D involved, then it's risky again. So you've got unknowns that are occurring when you're doing tests and what the result tests might fail. Then you have to redo everything.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. And it's something to always have in the back of your mind when you're pricing a project or estimating a project. And as you said previously, not every project is the same.
Exactly, exactly. And by finding one that you've done before that's similar, you're not only helping to make the estimate more accurate, but you're knowing the difference between what was actually delivered and what was estimated. Because presumably the one you found is one you actually delivered as well. Maybe it wasn't, but if it was, you've got the difference between what you estimated and what was actually the time that was actually spent on the project.
And how does your company 25 help solve the problems of project price and project estimation?
So the big thing is it's a web application on a central database. So you bring your information into one place. If all we did was replicate what the people do in Excel, but bring it onto a central database, that would be great. That is a lot of the benefit because now you've got that repository that you can search. But we also provide a lot of other features on top of that you can't get in Excel. So for example, there's workflow around the proposal process itself. So you can go through all the different approvals. There's various industry standard ways to approve proposals, or obviously a client may have its own workflow. Different levels of reporting and approval on a big bid could be quite significant. And then also we have AI-based pricing, so we can automatically look at prior history of prices, what was won and what was lost, and we can marry up between value-based pricing and market-based pricing and cost-based pricing. The other thing is there's a lot of financial information. The project estimate is like an ERP system in simulation mode, because what you're really doing is you're saying, well, what happens if I do this project? It might be a 10-year project. It could be $1 billion project. So it could be a big chunk of your business for the next 10 years. So you're really estimating what's going to happen in your business. So there's a lot of financial data. There's currency conversions, there's escalation, inflation that impacts, there's indirect costs that you've got to apply to the direct cost of fringe and G&A and overhead, there's support costs and freight and shipping, and all the different burdens that you need to apply as well. So there's a lot of financial math, as it were, that we do on the estimate to make it more accurate. So that's the main thing, is that we have a central web application with a central database, and then there's a bunch of math that we do to basically improve the estimate and make it more accurate.
Amazing. And Richard, the final question I have for you is a reoccurring question I ask all the guests on the podcast. But what has been the most important piece of advice you've received, and how has it helped you in your career?
The most important piece of advice, and the advice I would give to someone else, is to follow your dream. So obviously there's a practical side to this. You can't just do something that will never make any money at all, ever. But at the same time, you have to enjoy your work. A lot of people find work a drudgery. They don't enjoy it, and they don't perform as a result. You can't perform with something you don't enjoy. There's odd days, maybe once a month, where work is a little boring. But honestly, every other day of the month, I love it. I love it, and I'm doing what I love. And if you do what you love and you really enjoy what you do, you're going to do well. You're going to perform and you're going to excel. So that's the most useful piece of advice I've heard. And that's what I
Love what you do and do what you love. It's simple, but it's effective.
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen that with experience as well, definitely.
Richard, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed our discussion. And for anyone who would like to get in contact with you, maybe see more of your software solution, your company 25, which is the best place to reach you and possibly see the solution in action?
So 25.com, the word 20 and the number 5. The name comes from Eagle Eye Vision. So 2020 vision is good human vision, 2010 vision is double, and 25 is double again, which is Eagle Eye. Hence the logo is an eagle and the number 25 at the same time. But basically, if you go to our website, 25.com, you can hit the contact us link to reach out to us, and then we'll be in touch and let's give you a demonstration.
Amazing. Richard, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Project Management Paradise podcast at projectmanagementparadise.com. Links mentioned during the episode, including speaker profile details and other resources, are available in the podcast description and on projectmanagementparadise.com, where you can also download or stream all our episodes to date.